Chota. This is the second interview I'm doing with the doctors, and today I'm interviewing one of my actual doctors, Dr. Krane.
And I'm Elliot Krane. I'm a pediatrician and an anesthesiologist who mostly does pain management practice right now. So Vivek is one of my pain patients.
That's right. So just to start off, I actually didn't know that. I just thought there's a specialty or fellowship that you do in pain. So can you tell us how about, let's start from what got you interested in medicine?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I've wanted to be a doctor, I would say going all the way back to high school, if not earlier. And when I was in medical school, there was a psychiatrist who was doing research, and he was doing research on the medical students to ask the question, why did they go into medicine? And I think in my own case, I had a lot of illnesses as a child. Not a lot of illnesses, but I had more than my share. I had migraine headaches from the age of 5, but they weren't recognized as migraine headaches. So I remember going in the hospital at the age of 5 because I think the doctors thought I had a brain tumor. And so I had bad headaches all through childhood and really bad allergies through childhood. And the other thing that happened was when I was 4, I had a younger brother named Richard who died. So he was born with a heart defect, and he died at the age of 1.5 or so. And those are actually my earliest childhood memories of him and my parents and him. So I think that experience was really formative. I had a pediatrician that I adored as a kid, and I saw her a lot because of my problems. She was also the only woman pediatrician, I think, in the entire state. It was unusual in the 1950s to there were not very many women in medicine. But I think all of those experiences led me to want to go into medicine.
All right, I can it completely makes sense, one of the reasons why I asked you specifically or asked Michael specifically that if I could interview you, or specifically you, is because when you came, I felt like you understood what I was going through, like you understood that I was actually human, actually in pain, right? And a lot of the doctors, they just look at my numbers and they see it till there. You see, like, okay, what's my ANC, what's my hemoglobin, and they're like, oh, that must be how he's feeling today and stuff. But you came in not only in rounds, but after, like in the middle of the day, you even check how the medicine was working, and now I know why. I wish that didn't happen to you, but it's one of the gifts you have as a doctor, that you're able to empathize with your patients. And that's something like a lot of doctors don't have, even at Stanford.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I think there's a lot of truth in what you say, but in fairness to the other doctors, I think a lot of patients really feel the same way that you just expressed about the people on the pain service. But the reason is, I think, that you have your team, and they're really focused on the leukemia and the ANCs and the toxicity of the drugs that they're giving you, and all of they have a lot of balls in the air. And one of them is how you're feeling, but they have all of these details. A surgeon, who operates on a patient comes in, and he's concerned about your blood pressure and your fever, and if you have a drain in, how much the drain is putting out, and they're also concerned with how you're feeling. But when we come in to see a patient, my team and I, the only thing we ask about is how you're feeling. we're curious about, and we're interested in things like the ANC and other things like that.
Yeah.
But that's not our focus. Our focus is only how are you feeling, and why are you feeling the way you feel, and what can we do about it. And so it makes us seem like we're more caring doctors, but I don't think they care less than I do. I think they just have a lot of other things they're thinking about, and the only thing I'm thinking about is, are you happy? The quality of your life right now.
Okay. So, your interest started at a young age when you were 4.
Right.
What degrees did you earn, and can you tell me your education path?
Sure.
Towards where you are now?
Well, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and from there I graduated from high school. It was a public high school, a big, huge public high school, thousands of kids.
How many kids?
It was like 4,000 or something like that. It was big. I don't know. It was big.
My school has 3,000 kids.
Yeah. And then from there I went to a tiny college in Portland, Oregon called Reed College. And we had like 1,050 students all together. There were about 250 kids in my freshman class.
Big change.
Big change. Steve Jobs went to Reed also. He was a year behind me.
Did you see him there?
Yes, I remember seeing him there, but I didn't know him. I don't think I met him. And I certainly didn't interact much with him, and he dropped out after his sophomore year. So I went to Reed. I graduated in 1974, a long time ago, 50 years ago. I applied to medical school during my senior year.
What degree did you get there?
Bachelor of Arts. And I majored in chemistry.
Okay.
I started in psychology. And then I decided I didn't like the orientation of the psychology department, but I really loved chemistry. I thought it was super cool. I loved chemistry in high school also. So I switched to being a chem major. But I also studied Renaissance history, and I studied calligraphy. So I'm actually a doctor with good handwriting. Those are my other big interests, and music also. I studied piano and I played in a Renaissance group, Renaissance instruments. So that was my college, and then I applied to a bunch of medical schools, and I was accepted at one, the University of Arizona, back in my hometown.
Nice.
I applied to 8 medical schools, and Stanford put me on a waiting list. I had a couple other waitlisted. I never got off the waiting list, but I was accepted at the University of Arizona, so that's where I went. So I want to keep going with that education history. So, do you know anything about Reed College?
Is it liberal arts?
It's a liberal arts college. It's academically really conservative and socially very, very liberal. And the learning style in medical school is very different than the learning style at Reed. It was, medical school is much more about memorization, and I was a good medical student, but I just didn't really like it very much. So I took a year and a half off in the middle of medical school, and I through some connections I made in medical school, I went to Cambridge University, and I worked in a research lab for a year and a half, and got some publications out of that, and learned research methodology, and didn't get a degree for doing that, but it was a very, very valuable year. And then I went back and finished medical school and graduated.
Did you get to choose what you wanted to do research in?
Well, I didn't. I not really. For me, it involved 2 things. One was I wanted to work in a research lab, and the second was I wanted to go and do it in Europe.
Yeah.
So, because I had an opportunity to do something like that right after medical school, and it's a long story, I won't go into it, but I had to pass that opportunity up. That was to work in an organic chemistry lab in Switzerland, and I really felt like I had missed an opportunity. So what happened was, when I was on my pediatric rotation, I met a British pediatrician, and so I just went to her office one day and I said, I really wanted to take some time off and work in a research lab. Do you know anybody back in England who, was a medical school colleague or a residency or something like that might be able to use me? And in fact, she did. So she put me into contact with somebody who was an MD, PhD at Cambridge University, and I wrote him a letter, and he invited me to come, and I did. And he said he couldn't pay me, and he didn't. And so I just I spent all my savings to live there for a year and a half, and worked there, and then came back and finished medical school. And it was a super valuable experience.
And so you come back, and then you have residency?
Yeah, I did my residency in Boston. First I did a pediatric residency at Mass General Hospital in Boston, and then I decided I wanted to practice intensive care medicine. I wanted to be a pediatric ICU doctor.
Okay.
Now, there were not really training programs back then. Now there's fellowships in intensive care. Back then there were not. So I went to my mentors in the intensive care unit and I said, how do I get to do this? What's the pathway? And they said, oh, you have to be an anesthesiologist. Because at that time, every ICU in the country was run by anesthesiology departments. I had no interest in anesthesiology. I just wanted to be an ICU doctor. So I said, okay, I can do that. I can do an anesthesia residency if that's what it takes. So I applied in anesthesia residency.
So you have 2 residencies.
Yeah. And I stayed at Mass General. I mean, it's a very good place. I didn't see any reason to go anywhere else. So I just interviewed at Mass General and they accepted me. So after the pediatric residency, I did an anesthesia residency. I actually did some private practice pediatrics in between because I couldn't start one right after the other. There was about a 6-month gap. So I worked at Cambridge City Hospital as a pediatrician, and then I started the anesthesia residency, and I did that. And then after anesthesia residency, I went to Boston Children's Hospital for a fellowship. And the fellowship was in pediatric anesthesia and pediatric critical care. So I became an anesthesiologist and an ICU doctor. Well, and then in the meanwhile, what I learned was that anesthesiology is really cool. I really loved it. So, and it was a good thing too, because it's really hard to be an ICU doctor and only an ICU doctor. It's very intense. And so after my fellowship, my first job was as a faculty member at the University of Washington and as a doctor at the Seattle Children's Hospital. So I was a half-time anesthesiologist and a half-time ICU doctor.
So you were basically an attending there?
Yeah. So I joined there in 1984, and I worked 50-50 in the ICU and in the operating room. And I was there until 1994 when I came here.
And what made you want to come here?
Well, I was really happy I loved Seattle, and my family was happy there. And in the children's hospital there was fantastic. I loved it. And but basically what happened was the chairman from pediatrics here and chairman of anesthesiology. Well, the children's hospital was brand new. It had just been built and it had been open just months. And they didn't have a head of anesthesiology.
So you got the promotion?
Yeah, so they came and they recruited me to be the first chief of anesthesiology here and to build the department.
Wow.
So at that time, there was anesthesiology departments were contracting, and a lot of anesthesia chiefs were basically letting people go, pink slipping them. But here was an opportunity to come and build a department and hire people. I thought that would be really great. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. But I came here because of that opportunity, plus the sunshine compared to Seattle. After growing up in Tucson, Seattle's kind of a tough place to live.
So now you're the head of anesthesiology at Stanford.
Well, I was for about 9.5 years, and after 9.5 years, in 2003, from 2004 to 2003, and I stepped down as the head of anesthesiology. I was head of anesthesiology and pain management, so I gave up the anesthesiology piece for a number of reasons, and continued on as head of pain management. So that's what I am now.
So the pain management part came when you came to Stanford?
No, when I finished my fellowship, I went to Seattle, and I really, during my fellowship and the beginning of my year in Seattle, I became really focused on children's pain, and it was really terribly managed. I saw a lot of children with badly managed pain after surgery or for medical illnesses, and it just wasn't being taken care of well. And I became very interested in trying to specialize in that. Nobody else was really doing that. And what I didn't realize was that the University of Washington was the world center for pain management. Not for pediatric pain management, nobody was doing that, but for pain management in adults. It was the first place in the world where that became a specialty, and it was started by an anesthesiologist named John Benica, and John Benica had retired, but he was still there at the University of Washington. Even though he was retired, he still came to his office every day, and he was an incredible teacher and role model. So there was another person at the Children's Hospital, a colleague of mine named Don Tyler, and he also became interested in treating pain. So the two of us decided to put together, to be a team, and to build a service, to build a program. And what we did was, we didn't really know much about how to do it, so we would go and talk to John Benica and to the other members of the team that he had already put together years before, which was really a good multidisciplinary team. So it included neurologists, neurosurgeons, psychologists, psychiatrists, physical therapists, anesthesiologists, and everybody, it was a comprehensive approach to treating pain. And so we used that model, and we built a service like that at the Children's Hospital. Wow. So I had already been doing it for 8 or 9 years before I came here.
Right. So, why pain? Why, I don't know, is anesthesiology more work than the pain service? Or why did you have such an interest in pain specifically?
So first of all, there was this huge need for it, and there still is. Almost everybody has pain at one time in their life or another. Almost everybody in the hospital has pain. And children's pain was not being taken seriously, and nobody really knew how to treat it the best way.
This you saw when you were in Seattle.
Right. And when I was in Boston too. So there was a need. It was intellectually stimulating because it was a wide open area where there was very little science. And but mainly there just was this really big need, a desire to do a better job taking care of people's pain.
And why do you think that is? How come it was so good for adults and not for kids?
Well, a lot of things in pediatric medicine lag about sometimes 10 years behind adult medicine.
Wow.
So, not everything, but a lot of things do. And because they get adopted for children after they've been proven to be safe and effective in adults. So that has to do with surgical techniques. Like laparoscopic surgery was done first in adults, and then later it became something that was done in kids.
That's so interesting because coming from an oncology perspective, it's the opposite. Pediatric cancers are, the treatments for pediatric cancers are way more developed for kids than adults because, kids are more resilient to the chemotherapies, so they have far more clinical trials and stuff.
Well, the other thing is that the pediatric oncologists formed an organization called COG, which is Children's Oncology Group, and very, very early. I remember when I was a resident, it was in the 1970s, and you can't imagine what cancer treatment was like then. It was horrible. it was brutal. As brutal as it is now, it was even more brutal then. We didn't have the analgesic drugs, and ondansetron didn't exist. And I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I just sat at the bedside, just like I am right now, holding the hand of a child while they just threw up all night long. And there was nothing I could do but hold their hand. And then restart IVs. They didn't have Hickman lines or ports. So it was like, start an IV, and then another IV, and then another IV, because it was terrible. It was really, really terrible. So, and I've seen cancer care go, it's just been incredible. I was at Boston Children's when the first bone marrow transplants started, and so it's been an amazing thing to stand as a spectator and watch this care go by, and then watch the survival numbers just really changed. And that was, the other thing that I saw was how unpredictable sometimes these things are. So I remember when I was a resident, I had a patient, and I wasn't much older than she was. She was 16, and I was a resident, so I was, in my early 20s, maybe 25 or 26. And so she was like a little sister to me. And she had a bone tumor called a Ewing sarcoma. And the Ewing sarcoma had started in her pelvis, and it had spread to her lungs. And the prognosis was horrible. She was from Brazil, and her family sold everything they could to come to Boston for treatment. Anyway, so nobody expected her to survive. Well, to make a long story short, she's in Brazil. She's a pediatric psychologist. Yes. She's 55 years old. I'm very good friends with her, and I quit Facebook, but I used to be Facebook friends with her. We still email. I'm still in touch with her mom and dad, her brother and her sister. They've come to visit me here in California all those years ago. So things are very unpredictable, and that's, I think that's really impressive. So so I've watched pain management. So I was saying, the oncologists formed this children's oncology group because there was so little known about the right way to treat these cancers, and so they pooled their data, and it was such that every patient who came in the hospital with a cancer diagnosis went on a clinical trial. Yeah. Every one of them. Pretty much. So they expanded their knowledge very, very rapidly.
Thank God. I'm on clinical trial right now, and I hope it helps too.
Yeah.
So now you're at Stanford, you're head of pain management. Mm-hmm. Are you happy?
Yes, I actually am. Though it took a while to be happy. The move here was very difficult. But yeah, I can say this quite honestly. I just love coming to work every day. I think I'm like one of the luckiest people in the world because I really like what I do. I'm a real introvert, and you may not get that impression. I'm a very introverted person. I don't like to be around a lot of people. I don't like to go to parties. And if I'm at a party, I'm always going to be the guy in the corner, either talking to the kid or the dog. Mm-hmm. I can only talk to a lot of people for so long, and then I'm depleted of energy. And but one-on-one or one-on-two or something like that, I have tremendous attachment to the patients that I take care of. I just like treating them. I like trying to help them. I like seeing them get better, and I love what I do. So I'm going to retire in a few years, and it was a very difficult decision to do that. I'll be 70 when I retire. I'm 67 now. So a lot of my friends and colleagues who are my age have already retired, and they tell me I should retire, and I say I can't think of anything I'd rather do. But I think 70 is probably long enough, so I'll do it at 70. But I love doing what I'm doing, and I love the people that I work with also. Especially like in the hospital, it's really teamwork, and it's really great to be a member of the team.
You said you get attached to patients a lot, but is that really something you would recommend to even patients or other doctors to do? Because especially in oncology,
It's tough in oncology.
But I'm sure you see other services too.
Yeah, you see all the other services, because every service has pain of some kind or another. But I used to. I'm a pediatric practitioner, so that means that technically speaking, when my patients turn 18, they're supposed to go over to the Stanford Pain Center and go over there. I've stopped sending my patients there, so I tell them I'll take care of them until they graduate from college or till I retire, whichever comes first. And I do. My oldest patients are 26 or 27 years old. They haven't graduated yet. I've taken care of them some of them since they were 12 or 13.
Wow.
And so I have a lot of patients that are young adults. And then I have patients that no longer come to me, but I still get their college graduation invitation and birth announcements when they have kids, or Christmas cards every year and holiday cards. So yeah, it's that's what I enjoy about this that I don't get as an anesthesiologist. When you're an anesthesiologist, you meet your patient, you try to relax them, try to give them confidence in you put them to sleep, you wake them up,
and
you don't see them again.
No.
Well, some patients you anesthetize over and over and over again, like the little kids who are having bone marrow transplants. You see them every day for their radiation. But mostly you see them once in their life, and that's it. And nobody ever remembers your name. Nobody. They remember the surgeon's name, but nobody remembers the name of the anesthesiologist. But so, remember, I started not as an anesthesiologist. I didn't know anything about anesthesia. I started as a pediatrician.
Right.
And I liked those relationships. I liked going to clinic as a pediatric resident and seeing patients over time.
So, there's pros and cons about everything. So, it's really nice to be able to form these relationships and see the same faces over and over, right? But one thing I still wonder is, especially when I was diagnosed and I first came on the floor, I saw all the rooms around me and I still hear the babies cry at night, and I think, whoa, how can a doctor come in every day to an environment where there's just so much sickness and unfairness, and for you it's people in agony, people in pain, right? What the baby do to deserve cancer? Why did anyone get that pain at all, right? So how can you come in every single day to work and just see all that? Like, what do you think? How do you not just start crying?
There are days like that. There are definitely days like that. And I do cry. And sometimes I go home and I cry. Fortunately, when I used to practice intensive care medicine, I would get that question asked to me sometimes. And the answer was that unlike in the adult intensive care unit, where most of the patients are elderly, or they've been horribly injured, or something like that, and the death rate is very, very high, in the pediatric ICU, the majority of our children did fine, and they were really, really sick, and then they got better and they went home.
Nice.
And the same is true for pain management. In the clinic and in the hospital too, we can go home and feel good at the end of the day because we know we've helped somebody. Go.
So after all these years, does your job seem repetitive?
That's one of the great things about my job, is that it's not repetitive. feel sorry for people who have to go to a job and do the same thing over and over again. I mean, every patient is unique and has a unique set of problems. And as you get older and more experienced, you see things, for the second, third, or 20th time, so you become more comfortable. But I mean, everything is different enough that it still is new and unique. Unfortunately, I only have a limited number of tricks in my bag, so there's not very many things I can put on the table to help. Very few drugs, but for me, one of the things that keeps me going is the ability to think creatively and to try to create new ways of doing things. I've always been a tinkerer. I like to take things apart and put them back together, and just think of new ways to do things. And a lot of people, and I don't have a lot of respect for authority. I think that's both good and bad. And a lot of people, I'll suggest doing something, and I'll say, well, you can't really do that because we've never done it that way before. And I'll say, well, let's do it that way now. And is there a rule not to? I'll just do things even though it may not be approved by, it's like when in March, at the beginning of the COVID thing, I decided that I was going to make my clinic 100% on Zoom. And I thought I should, not just my clinic, but the pain clinic, which is like 10 different doctors.
Yeah, because you're the head.
Yeah, so I just said, we're going to go to Zoom, 100%, no more clinic in person. And I said, well, I should probably run that by the Packard Hospital administration. So I sent an email to about 5 or 6 administrators on a Thursday, and I said, I think we need to go to Zoom, 100%, for the safety of our patients, the safety of our parents and grandparents, and the safety of us. No answers. So on Friday, I sent the email again, and I said, I really want to do this. Please give me some, feedback and let me know how you think about it. No answers. So I just said, okay, nobody said no. They had their chance, so I'm doing it.
What advice, Dr. Krane, would you give to any new doctor?
I would say for the doctors in a hospital like this, the pediatric residents or the surgeons dealing with children, is to always listen to the child's mother. If they tell you there's something wrong, you better believe it and look for it, because they're going to be right almost all the time. They have tremendous intuition that's almost 100% accurate, and ignoring them is asking for trouble. Also, to accept information from wherever it comes from. If it's, there's a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have a patient who's now 22. For 9 years I've been taking care of her. I've learned more about that condition from the mother than I have from any other source.
Wow.
She made it her business to educate me on this condition. And she would bring me binders full of articles, videos to watch. And I think some doctors would just say, I already know about it or whatever. She would bring me a 3-inch binder with 50 or 60 articles to read. And the next time she came to clinic, she would ask me if I read them, if I was prepared to talk about them. And I know so much because she just made it her business to educate me about her daughter's condition.
And I gotta agree with that. I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, blood cancer, right? But I had symptoms for 6 weeks, and so it took me 6 weeks to get diagnosed. And my symptoms were like I was super lethargic, and I was the team captain in my wrestling team. I was super conditioned, so I just thought I was deconditioned from the coronavirus, but I would still go on walks to try and boost my stamina. But then I couldn't even run anymore, and then my ears were blocked. so they thought it was allergies. That's what they kept telling me. It's allergies because your eustachian tube is inflamed from allergies. Like you, I have pretty bad allergies and asthma too, right? And then I started having these headaches, and then they do a test here where they press on your fingers and they see how fast it becomes red again for blood recirculation, and that wasn't happening for me. For me, it stayed pale. So my mom was the one who told my doctor. She's like, he doesn't look right. This isn't how he's been feeling. Do a blood test. And then the doctor finally listened, and that's how they found out that I had leukemia. So I agree 100%.
Yeah. They know. They know when their kid isn't right.
Okay, Dr. Krane, why don't you tell us from waking up to going to bed, what is a day in your life look like?
It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. There's no typical day, and that's what makes, not just because the patients are variable, but I get to do different things. So there are some days that are clinic days. Now clinic is all on Zoom still, but in the old days, I would get up. Usually there'd be like a meeting or something like that at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd start seeing clinic patients at 9. I like working in clinic because it's a casual environment, and you can get lunch at lunchtime and order out or something like that, and interact with patients and the nurses and stuff, and then at 5:30, sometimes at 4 o'clock, go home. Play with my dogs, take them for a walk. I'm the chef at home, so then I would make dinner for my family, and then usually do a crossword puzzle with my wife, the New York Times crossword puzzle.
Nice.
Go to bed. We never watch TV. She left. we never ever watch TV.
Why not?
Just dislike it. I think that's, my wife and I are like that way. We just don't see anything worthwhile to watch.
Do you mean TV or the news?
TV. In 2016, during the last presidential election, we went on vacation in August, and while we were out of town, we had some painters come in and paint the inside of the house, and we thought that would be a good idea because then the smell would be gone by the time we got back. So we got back in August, lived in, just went about our business, and then in March, Hillary Clinton was debating Bernie Sanders, and we thought we should watch that. We turn on the TV, and just static, like there's no cable signal. So the next day I called up Comcast and I said, there's something broken about our cable, can you come and fix it? So the next day they come and they pull the cabinet out away from the wall, and they said the cable's not plugged into the wall jack, because the painters had unscrewed it in August to pull it away from the wall so they could paint.
Yeah.
And so from August to March we didn't even know that our cable was, so we just don't, we have other things to do. There's so many other things to do. There's books to read, and dogs to walk, and puzzles to do, and food to cook and clean up. I don't know how people find the time to watch it, to be honest with you. So if we, we'll watch movies, with Apple TV or we'll stream some things, but that we don't watch regular TV.
Yeah.
So, and then other days I might be doing procedures. So I'll be in the hospital and I'll be doing procedures for pain management, doing nerve blocks or things like that, usually with kids under anesthesia.
Yeah.
Other days I have a research day, so I'll be working, in my office, writing papers or writing lectures or something like that. So it's quite variable.
Wow.
And then when I used to practice anesthesiology, which I stopped doing about 2 years ago, some days I'd be going to the operating room and giving anesthesia to patients. So every day was a little different. It makes it interesting.
Do you think that being a doctor hinders your ability to have a family or spend time with your family?
Yeah, unfortunately that was really the case. Like one of the things that when I lived in Seattle, my kids were like elementary school age, and I really wanted to be a Little League coach. But there was just no way that I could reliably get out of work at 2:30 or 3 o'clock every day
Yeah.
and practice with the kids and do the games. And on Saturday, I'd have some days, Saturdays, I'd be on call. I really wanted to do that, and so I would kind of be like an assistant coach, and I'd show up when I could, and to practice with the kids because I love baseball. But so there's stuff like that you definitely, well, depending on the kind of doctor you are, but with me, it was definitely something I wanted to do and couldn't do. But I would just dedicate myself to the family when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I was still the chef, and there were some days, obviously, I'd work late and couldn't cook, and then my wife would have to feed them. But yeah, it definitely. But I can't feel sorry for myself. When I lived in Boston, my best friend was a chef,
Mm-hmm.
and then he worked in other restaurants, and then he opened his own restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 years after we moved to Seattle, my family and I went back to Boston, and we stayed with him, Isaac, and his family. His kids are exactly the age of Mike. He had 2 girls, I had 2 boys, exactly the same age. So I stayed at his house, and when I saw how hard Isaac and his wife Joanne worked in their restaurant, it was way harder than I worked as a doctor. And I realized I'm not the only person in a career that works hard. I thought I worked harder than everybody, but he worked harder than me.
For sure, and there's medicine isn't the only profession where it's hard
Yeah.
to like have a family, right?
Yeah. Do you know the restaurant across the street, Vina? Right across, there's Tootsie's, and then there's Vina Inoteca, right across the street from an Italian restaurant. It's owned by this guy named Rocco, and he and his wife. His first child's named Elliot, and I'd like to say he named him after me because I was such a good customer. He did name him after me. He named him about 65 years after me. But and he has 2 other kids, and his kids come to the restaurant to see their dad.
Wow.
Because he's there till 11 o'clock every night, 6 nights a week.
Wow.
He's a traditional European chef. He's at his restaurant cooking. He doesn't leave it to somebody else. That's a hard job. And then, of course, there's other people that work all night long. There's policemen and firemen and emergency workers.
Nurses.
Night shift nurses, right. We're not the only ones who make these sacrifices.
Okay. What's something you dislike about your job?
The ego of besides patients not doing well, sometimes you run into egos that are sometimes so egotistical that it could actually harm the patient. People who think they know everything and don't want to ask for help or advice, that's always bad. You want people to know their limitations.
People who don't listen to their moms.
Right.
Right? To everyone watching.
But there's not much I don't like about my job. There's some jobs I don't think I would want to do in terms of being a doctor, but honestly, it's a hard question to answer because I enjoy what I do so much. I can answer that question. First of all, there's the BS of working in a hospital with some of the decisions that are made at administrative levels that don't really make sense. That's one thing. The second thing is the computerized medical record, the electronic medical record.
Really?
It drives me crazy. Yeah. It is. It's not designed to do what it's supposed to do. The electronic medical records are really made so that hospitals have better performance billing and getting money from. What the physicians and the nurses used was an afterthought, because they're selling the software, not to doctors and nurses. We don't make decisions about what we want in a medical record. They sell the software to the administrators, and they sell the software basically based on how efficient and effective it is in doing administrative tasks like billing. And so it drives me crazy. It's kludgy, it's difficult to use, it occupies a lot of time, it generates thousands of pages of redundant information that don't contribute to medical care.
Wow. That's something I had no idea about.
I'll give you just a quick example. I do some work as an expert witness for lawyers who are suing or being sued
Okay.
in malpractice cases.
Okay.
So here, sometimes for the defense, sometimes for the expert. So I was involved with a case of a hospital in Sacramento. I was asked to review a record by a defense attorney and tell them if I thought there had been malpractice. So it was a child that came in, had surgery and anesthesia. Things didn't go well. 1 or 2 weeks later, she wound up paraplegic, okay, paralyzed from waist down because of a complication. So 25 years ago, it would be a paper record, and the paper record for a 1-week hospitalization might have been 50 or 60 pages long. Okay, that's all.
That's still a lot.
Yeah, okay. Guess how many now that with the electronic medical record, guess how many pages they sent me electronically? Take a guess.
500?
Take another guess.
1,000?
I'll give you one more guess.
50,000?
10,000 pages.
Oh my god.
That's 10...
For 1 week.
Well, about 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks.
10,000 pages. And almost all the pages are redundant and repetitive. So, it's horrible. I bet the lawyers like it because they charge by the hour. So that's more for them to read and more for them to charge. But using the electronic medical record, sometimes it's just infuriating. So that's one thing I don't like. I can see the advantages of it, but sometimes I wish I could just do a little paper record again.
Let's switch to a more happier note, because we've been talking about a lot of serious things.
Okay.
Okay, what are something, I know we've been over this, but tell us some happy stories.
Happy medical stories?
Yeah.
Success stories.
Yes.
Okay, let me think of...
Like when I tell you your best success story, is there a patient that comes to your mind automatically?
A lot of patients. So there was here's a good story. I like this one. There was a little baby. He was 10 months old or so, and he had liver failure, and he was from Hawaii, and they flew him here for a liver transplant.
Okay.
It was I wasn't involved with the anesthetic. It was like one of the worst experiences the anesthesiologist had. It was a horrible case for them. Horrible case. It was so difficult, and they got the kid out of the operating room and in the intensive care unit, and the new liver started to die.
Oh no.
And then it did die.
Oh no.
The kid has a dead liver, and you have to take it out because now you have this dead tissue in the abdomen, and it produces lots of poisons and potassium. So they take the liver out, and they relist him for a new liver transplant. And time goes on. Another day passes, and you can't live very long without a liver, even with the medical technology that we have. And it looks like he's going to die. It looks like he looks like he's dying, and it looks like he's brain dead. And the team goes to the parents and they say, we think that he went by the initials KK because he had a very long Hawaiian name that started with K and had another K in it. We called him KK. And it looked like there was no hope, and we should take him off the ventilator and allow him to die. And the parents said that the mother's father and mother were on their way. They were on a flight from Hawaii. Can we wait till they get here? And so 6 hours, you know. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the team said, of course.
Sorry, can we also turn a light on?
Yeah. Of course.
So the team says, of course we're going to wait, and we're not going to do anything till they're here. So in those 6 hours, another liver became available.
Wow.
To transplant. And I think some surgeons would have said, no, we don't need it, it's too late. But the surgeon, who's now head of transplant surgery here, name is Waldo, Waldo said, we're going to go for it. And so I was assigned to be the anesthesiologist, and I knew about this child. Everybody knew about what was going on. And when I sat down with the parents, and I had this intuition.
It's gonna work.
Yeah, and I shared that with the mother, his mother, KK's mother, and I just thought it's going to be okay. And so we took him to the operating room. The new liver goes in. He goes back to the ICU, and in fact, he's not becoming brain dead. He starts to wake up.
Wow.
And to make a very long story short, he does great. He wakes up. He's neurologically normal. The liver does well. 2 or 3 weeks later, he's out of the hospital in the Ronald McDonald House, and he's doing great.
Nice.
Now, fast forward 2 years, I'm invited to give some lectures at a meeting in Hawaii. They've gone back to Hawaii. And so I call up the transplant coordinator, and I say, do you have the telephone number and address for KK?
Wow, you still remember him after
Oh yeah,
2 years?
you can't forget something like that. I mean, it was impressive. And so I contacted the family and said, hey, we're coming to Oahu. It would be really nice to see KK again.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say, I became pretty close to the mom and dad. Not very, very close, but the dad and the grandfather played the guitar. And they would sit it used to be outside the ICU, there were these couches in the hallway. And they would sit on this couch and they would play the guitar, and they would fill the whole hospital with this music. It was beautiful. And my son at that time was about 13, and he was just learning to play the guitar. And I said, hey, if I brought my son, could you teach him some stuff? So I brought my son, and they were teaching him guitar. It was really a nice relationship. So they remembered that, and so we arrive in Hawaii, and the whole family's at the airport.
Wow.
The mother, the father, KK, who's now about 2.5. And if he didn't pull up his shirt and show you the scars, you'd never know there was anything wrong with him. He was a big, bruising, 2-year-old Hawaiian. And aunts and uncles, and they had leis for all of us, but they had candy leis for our kids.
Uh-huh.
And they wouldn't let me rent a car. They gave me a car to drive.
Wow.
And then the next day they took us all surfing, a surfing safari, and we went
Wow.
beach to beach to beach. And the mother, then because of the experience she had here, she became a nurse.
Wow.
And then they moved here so she could do her nurse training at this hospital. And they still live in this area now.
Is she still nursing?
She's still in nursing, but she's working at another hospital.
Wow.
She used to work in the ICU upstairs, downstairs, wherever it was. But yeah, so I used to then, for liver transplants, I used to take a picture of KK, a photograph of him as a healthy 2-year-old, and I would tape it to the anesthesia machine, because sometimes, I'll tell you the truth, sometimes it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm working in the operating room, and it looks like a futile case. Like, what are we doing here? This is just, it's just terrible. I'm tired. The resident's tired. And I put that up there as a reminder. It's just like the girl I told you about when I was a resident who was 16. You never know how things are going to turn out. It's just a reminder. And I put that up there for the resident also and teach them. I tell them the story I just told you. I said, you have to keep trying, because you just don't know. So that's my happy story.
That's such a happy story.
And people who were around back then, so that was probably 20 years ago, people still remember KK.
Do you know what he does now?
That's a good question, because he's a young adult now. No, I don't. I haven't seen him probably in about 10 years. I'll find out and I'll let you know.
What type of people do you recommend should go into the medical field? And what type of people do you recommend should not go into the medical field?
Stupid people should not go into the medical field.
Wow.
Medicine is so huge. There's room for everybody. I mean, if there's somebody who has no skill with other people, they can become a scientist and work in a lab with rats, or a pathologist and and work with chemicals or something like that. People can go into medicine and then go work in startups or pharmaceutical companies and do drug development. So, there's room for all kinds of people, technically talented people, handicapped people. We had a resident here who I think he was a surgery resident, and he was horribly injured in a bicycle accident, and he became paraplegic. You can't be a surgeon if you're quadriplegic. Really, he could barely move his hands. He has a little movement in his arms and his hands, no movement below his chest. Can't be a surgeon anymore. So he switched to radiology. So now he rides a Segway for mobility in the hospital, and he looks at X-rays and does X-ray reports all day long. Because there's room for everybody in medicine, all kinds of things. So, but we just want them to be smart. And I would like them to be nice people, but there's even room for not nice people in medicine. You have a deal.
It's comforting. But then it's also weird because it's so hard to get into medical school now, right?
It's always been hard. I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I graduated from college, I applied to 8 medical schools. I only got into 1.
Nowadays, people apply to like 20 or 30.
Yeah, and I have the children of friends of mine who have applied to medical school and been rejected, or didn't get into the medical schools they want to, and I tell them, well, look at me. And I tell them, okay, so you didn't get into medical school this year? Do something valuable with your year. Go to work in a laboratory, or do something interesting. Go make a documentary film, learn to play the piano, or something. Do something valuable, and apply again. And every time, they've always gotten in the second time.
Nice.
So, and that sort of perseverance, people look at that favorably in admission committees.
Alright, Dr. Krane, I'm going to ask you this because I ask this to every doctor. I think I know the answer, but are you still in debt?
No. But it took...
Yeah!
Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, my parents didn't have any money. My dad was a small businessman, and my mom was a bookkeeper, and we were really very much working class family, so they had no money. But I got a good scholarship to go to college, and so I graduated with a relatively small amount of debt in student loans, probably something like $15,000, $20,000 from my college tuition.
Okay.
My medical school tuition was $500 a year at the University of Arizona.
That's it?
That's it. So lucky I didn't get into Stanford. I would have been in a lot more debt. But it was the University of Arizona, and I was an Arizona resident, so it was $500 a year. So I paid much more for my apartment than I did for tuition. So I actually graduated with not very much debt, and it probably took about 10 or 15 years. No, probably less than that to pay it down to nothing. These days, the kids have crushing amounts of debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt from college and from medical school.
Yeah.
And it unfortunately affects the decisions that they make in terms of the kind of career they want to go into. It has to. They have to make a financially wise decision. So a lot of them are not going to go into specialties or places where the pay is not very good.
Like pediatrics.
Like pediatrics. Pediatrics has always been at the bottom.
Why?
Our society does not value children. That's why. Think of that. Our society does not value children, so teachers are very badly paid.
Yes.
Pediatricians are very badly paid. It's just how it is. In England, our society is basically puritanical and English in origin.
Yes.
In England, the society that protects animals is the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Protection, the RSPA, the Royal Society for the Protection of Animals. The Society for the Protection of Children is the SPC, the Society for Protecting Children. It doesn't have royal patronage. It's not the Royal Society. It's the to protect animals, dogs and cats, it's the Royal Society. They're more important. The Society to Protect the Welfare of Children doesn't have royal patronage, which means they get much less money. The Queen doesn't give them money. So that's a good example of where children stand, seen but not heard, as they used to say.
Wow. How? If there's one thing you could say to the world, what would it be?
To the world?
Mm-hmm. If everyone right now, somehow, if they saw your face and you had something, you could say anything to them.
I wish the world would celebrate diversity. One of the things that I love, I really do, is diversity. I love just all the different kind of people there are. Racial, ethnic, cultural, religious. It just makes life so interesting to interact with people from different backgrounds. And I see the world taking this hard right turn with xenophobia and hatred of the other. Not just in this country, but in Europe,
the world,
in Russia, in the Middle East, and that's sad. So that's what I would wish is this just celebrate the differences in people. It makes life much more fun and easy and interesting.
And from a medical perspective, no matter what race, no matter what economic background, geographic location, you've had patients from all over everywhere in the world. Have you seen any difference in them? I mean, have you seen a reason to, what I'm trying to say here is they're all medically the same still, right?
Oh yeah, the heart's on the left side of the chest,
right.
10 toes and 10 fingers usually. There's, if you sequence their DNA, there's no, you can't find a difference between your DNA and my DNA. You have a slight accent, and I don't know exactly where your family comes from, but nobody, a geneticist, could not tell you from me. So there's a difference between me and your mom. Geneticists would be able to find that difference pretty easily. But you know what I'm saying is that we are all the same stuff.
We are all humans from Earth, and we should be more inclusive.
Exactly.
Do you have anything to say to the people who are having the toughest time of their lives here in the hospital?
Oh boy, that is so hard.
What is your advice that you can give them?
What is a hard question? Well, one thing I really never want to do with patients or their parents or their family members is to take hope away. I think that's a horrible thing to do. Now there are circumstances when there really is no hope, and I'll come back to that. But those circumstances, fortunately, are not that common for us, and there's always hope. And as I told Vivek, there are enough times. I mean, I've been doing this now for 35 years or so, and there have been plenty of times when my ability to prognosticate was proven to be very wrong. And I have so many children that I can remember that I didn't think were going to really do well or make it, and they did. But what do you tell somebody what do you tell a kid or a teenager especially who just feels like they're the only one? I don't know that there's no magic words that you can say to make them feel that way. I think the only thing that you can really do is give them the feeling that they're not alone, and that you're going to be by their side, and you're going to spread it out with them. to whatever extent, and stay with them. And of course, you can tell them stories about instances where it seemed like there was no hope, but there was hope, and people did well. But I don't think that really helps to tell people that, because, am I right?
Yeah, I kind of want to add on to Dr. Krane. What helped me, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I'm not even allowed to leave my room, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's any other patient. I have acute myeloid leukemia, which isn't even which is like an uncommon type of leukemia. So I don't know anyone else on the floor. I'm not able to meet anyone, right? I felt alone. What helped me was reaching out to survivors who had the same disease,
Yeah.
and that I did through my nurses and doctors, and just knowing that like someone's been through it before you have,
Yes.
that helps a lot.
I'm really glad you pointed that out. We take care of a problem in the pain clinic. It's not as serious as what you have, but it's called complex regional pain syndrome, and it's an unbelievably painful condition that affects usually in our patients a leg, a foot or a leg. It's in older patients an arm or a hand. It's unbelievably painful, and it's really helpful. And every one of those, nobody's ever heard of this before they get it, so nobody knows anybody who's had it.
Right.
And so it's really, really helpful for them to meet our other patients who have had it and have done super well. And one of the patients that was in our program and now is doing great is actually the varsity volleyball coach at Stanford. And she will come and talk to the kids in our program about that. And so, yeah, I think that's hugely useful. And also, we also do group therapy sessions, so our kids, they can be in the same room because they're not immunosuppressed, and they can share their experiences, so not feeling alone, like you're the only person that's experienced this. And that's true for just about everything,
Yeah. Because I'm sure a lot of patients like me ask, why me, Why do I have to go through this? Chances are someone in history has already been through the same thing and they survived it, just like you probably will.
Right.
And you can.
Yeah, I think that's a better answer than I was able to give.
And the other question was, you told a story of...
Right. So my question for that was, there's so much unfairness in the hospital and so much pain that Dr. Krane has to see. How do you handle going through that every single day, just being surrounded in that environment? And how do you handle that, and how do you just not cry?
Yeah, and my answer is that I think crying is necessary. I mean, not everybody can cry, but I mean, I think that ability to feel and to express sorrow and to mourn is a very important thing for physicians to allow themselves to feel. Now there are times when I think it can be extreme, and I was reminded of an oncologist when I was a resident. He was a young oncologist, just a few years out of his training, and we took care of I was a resident, a pediatric resident, and we had a little girl with neuroblastoma. It's a disease of the adrenal gland, a tumor of the adrenal gland, and it had spread to her bone marrow and to her bones, and she had some behind one eye, and her prognosis was bad. We knew that, but she survived about a year and a half, and then she passed away. And this oncologist named Marty Fosberg was so attached, as we all were, to this family, the mother and the father and the baby. He literally walked out the hospital door that day, and he never came back. And nobody saw Marty again for years. He finally resurfaced about 5 years later. I have no idea what he was doing during that time. And he went back to work, but he went back to work in the blood bank as a hematologist. He never took care of a patient again, which is really sad because he was such a kind and caring doctor. So there can be, one can be too attached, and feel too much, but that's way better than those individuals who detach themselves and don't allow themselves to feel anything at all.
Yeah.
And he still came back to help people. He didn't quit on helping
He did.
people.
In the way he could.
Yeah, in the way that he felt that he could.
Alright,
Wouldn't that be
Doctor.
nice?
Alright, Dr. Krane. Thank you for coming on to the Vivek show, and thank you for allowing me to interview you.
Thank you. It was so enjoyable.